we began to devise an action sequence which would encompass all the various things that we could put into the car with Q's assistance. We know what the script is, so we can invent the gadgets that suit us. There was the very exciting chase where he was taking on the whole of the Russian army, you know, tanks and what have you, and he always had a device on the car that would get him out of trouble.
We had the heads-up display in it with rockets and also the laser system, which was quite a good gag, I thought, with the Lada.
What happened?
Salt corrosion.
We didn't use the ejector seat again, but we put extra things on, like skis that came down for when he's may find himself on the ice somewhere. Of course, you don't tip the audience off that that's what's going to happen, but it just so happens that he finds himself on a frozen lake and he's able to press a button and able to outmaneuver the opposition. In particular, wheels that described a hole in the ice. And, of course, the opposition car goes onto the hole in the ice and sinks. And the Aston Martin, on several occasions, we almost lost it. It almost sank in the ice. You know, several times it partially broke through the ice, and we had to drag it out quickly.
Time to leave.
We all had our hearts in our mouths every time a vehicle was going over somewhere where we knew was a bit suspect.
With the living daylights, Aston Martin seemed to have regained their place in Bond's affections. But it would be a short-lived reunion. A lengthy legal dispute meant the next film wouldn't be made for 6 years. By then, Bond had another new face and his car another new badge. In 1995, after a gap of 30 years, an Aston Martin DB5 was back in a Bond film, but only to establish new boy Pierce Brosnan at the beginning of GoldenEye. 3 decades earlier, the Bond team had to virtually beg for vehicles. But now, manufacturers were queuing up to cooperate, and the surprising announcement was that James Bond's next car would not be an Aston Martin,
Stop this car at once!
but a BMW.
We do quite a large amount of product placement, and this really was the cream of product placement. So we began a relationship with the Bond organisation with the Z3.
Right, now pay attention, 007.
It was the launch of the car, effectively. It was the first time the car had been seen.
All points radar.
British industry had fallen on hard times, really, and we had to go with a German manufacturer. What happens when we go around to make these stunt sequences with these cars, it's necessary to get a lot of information from the manufacturer.
There was a huge enthusiasm for Bond within the BMW organisation. I think the chairman was a particular fan, which always helps.
The deal with BMW was done relatively late in the production of GoldenEye, which meant there was precious little time to film its involvement. And because BMW determined that no one should see their new model before the release of the film, security was tight.
It was so under wraps at that time, you know, it was locked up by their technicians every night, and we weren't allowed to really do too much to it. It's pretty cosmetic.
We had the various kind of gadgets that were just shown, if you remember, in Q's workshop. So the involvement of the car was kind of minimal.
Now, this I'm particularly proud of. Behind the headlights, Stinger missiles.
Excellent. Just the thing for unwinding after a rough day at the office.
Need I remind you, 007, that you have a license to kill, not to break the traffic laws.
BMW mounted an intensive publicity campaign to establish the Z3 as a Bond car. The film was a big success, and BMW's faith in the power of the Bond brand had not been misplaced.
The resulting interest from the general public, the buying public, was enormous, and we ended up selling almost 300,000 Z3s. And this was the real kick-off, and the global exposure that James Bond can give you, and the massive interest there is right around the world, means that a car that's launched globally, as the Z3 was, has an immediate recognition, and the brand is already built right up.
For all the publicity surrounding the Z3 and GoldenEye, the car was only on screen for a few minutes, and disappointingly, hardly any of its gadgets were used. But BMW fans feeling short-changed only had to wait a couple of years before seeing what Bond and a Beamer could really do. .007's tricksy mobile phone in Tomorrow Never Dies must go down as one of the best Bond gadgets ever. BMW's flagship executive saloon, the 750iL, was stacked with so much Q-branch equipment it made the main car park sequence one of the best car chases for years.
Welcome. Please fasten seatbelt. Reduce speed. Pedestrians in roadway.
On Tomorrow Never Dies, we had the 7 Series BMWs, of which we had 16 of, and I don't think we sent any back in one piece. But we had to strip them out to be able to blind drive, i.e. laying on your back. The guy that was driving them, he had to lay on the floor. We'd extended the gear sticks, the steering wheel, all the pedals, all the controls, and he was laying flat on the floor with his head beneath the back seat, with just 3 screens above him covered in black velvet, driving, reading off 3 screens which had lipstick cameras feeding views to them from the wing mirrors and the rear view mirror, which is very disorientating. And his biggest problem with the whole chase was motion sickness.
The length of time regarding the BMW things, it was must have stretched probably over 4 or 5 months. All sorts of modifications, you know, even bullet impacts on windscreens and things like that. All had to be, you know, we had a whole factory full of spare windscreens, spare wings, spare lights, mirrors. It was a real stacked up, ready for any instance, really.